Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. We are incredibly lucky to be joined by a very special guest on today's show. Dave Johnson is the president and CEO of ASE. Dave's wealth of knowledge and experience has driven him to lead this iconic organization, a brand that I think we all know and love and have been familiar with for all of our careers, right? I talked to Dave, I think before the show, and talking about how I remember the branding as a kid, and it's been a part of my life for most of my life. So, Dave, it's an absolute honor to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, me too, Jay, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm just excited to be here, seeing all the good things that WrenchWay is doing out there, and to get a chance to just have a chat is a lot of fun for me.
So I want to start, like we do with most shows, in diving into your background and really what got you to this position today. You've got a fascinating background, one that was very OE focused, spent a lot of time with Ford Motor Company. Let's talk about the early days, though. What drove you to want to be in the automotive industry in the first place?
Well, that is a great question. You may be sorry you asked, but it might help if I just kind of go back to the beginning.
Please.
I was raised in what I call the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, up by a place called Cody, Wyoming. Some may be familiar with that. And the town that I lived outside of was called Burlington, and Burlington was a population of 100. So thinking about from a school perspective, I was just talking about this the other day with some friends. Student body of 64, that was 9th through 12th grade, and my graduating class was one of the bigger ones at the time, a graduating class of 18. We were pretty proud of that. So I tell my wife, well, when I was dating her, to impress her, I told her that I was president of the student body, captain of the football team and the basketball team, and I let that go on for a little while. I couldn't hold the secret for too long. Then I had to tell her the rest of the story, and then she wasn't as impressed. But by then it was too late, and she married me anyway. So after 33 years, she's still putting up with this country bumpkin. So anyway, grew up farming and ranching and trucking and heavy equipment, construction type jobs. Farming for us seems like you had to have all these other jobs to feed the farming habit, and so with that you get a lot of experience. Not a lot of cash, but you get a lot of experience. And so grew up just fixing anything on the farm, and had a brother that actually went to Wyotech. Some people will be familiar with Wyotech back in the early 70s, way back in the day. And so between he and my dad, I essentially apprenticed under them, because you lived out in the middle of nowhere. You literally, you fixed what you ran, whether it was your cars, your trucks, your tractors, anything. And so I started washing parts at about 8 years old. I just still distinctly remember that, cleaning engine parts for my brother and for my dad. And I loved it. So like so many of us that end up in the technician and technical side, it's just kind of born into you. And it was that way with me. And, some say, well, you're a cowboy. Well, I probably wouldn't qualify as a cowboy, because I'd much rather prefer riding motorcycles and driving trucks than dealing with a horse, because it was just misery. Other than when, it was elk hunting season or something like that. And then you battle with your horse for a few days until everybody settled down, and you'd go have fun, and then you'd start all over again the next spring when you're driving cattle or something. But anyway, so I kind of preferred the equipment and trucks and cars to any of that. So anyway, fast forward a little bit. All I wanted to do was turn a wrench. I wanted to get off the farm, turn a wrench, get paid for it. I thought there could be nothing better than that. And I actually spent year and a half in New Zealand, of all places.
Wow.
So how did that happen? Well, I happen to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, and I served a mission, and you get sent where they want you, and so they sent me to New Zealand, and that I had no idea even where New Zealand was. That was like paradise, and so did that for a couple of years. That was a little time out from working, and then when I came back actually to Utah and was working, and I told my dad. By that time they'd sold the farm. He was driving truck and kind of in a transitionary state, and he said, when you get to be my age, and he was probably about 50 at the time, he said, that concrete floor gets pretty hard, so fine, you can turn a wrench, you can always do that. Maybe go to school, get a little bit more of an education than he had, and his was, he didn't even graduate from high school, he nor my mom, and they're amazing people, and they're very smart. So formal education is not an indicator of what you know necessarily. And so I went to a place called Weber State University, started in their automotive program, and they had a 4-year automotive program, and so I went through that and morphed into this mechanical engineering technology program. And anyway, I don't want to bore everyone with all of that, but
No, this is great.
long story short, after 4 years of that, and again working, and I was working my way through. I was probably worked in a body shop. I was doing side jobs for people, engine tune-up, you name it, I was doing it. And again, running heavy equipment at a sand and gravel pit, just a little bit of everything to survive. And when I'd finished up, I actually had things set up to go to work for Kiewit Mining and Engineering back up in Wyoming. And I thought, hey, this is ideal for me. I get to play with heavy equipment, which I always enjoyed doing, and I'm set. I even did an internship with them up in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Wow.
Lo and behold, I'm graduating, and the economy takes a dive. This was way back in 1990, and so hit a recession, and they said, sorry, we're not going to be able to take you. And I'm kind of in panic mode. About that time, Ford Motor Company came recruiting, and I had no intention of going back, what I consider to be back east. I didn't think of Michigan as the Midwest back then. I thought that's the East, and there's no way. There's no mountains there. Well, anyway, again, long story short, in spite of my protesting, I got conned into interviewing with them by the placement, the school placement office. And there's a story behind that. Won't go into it, but I did it, treated it like a practice interview, so I was very relaxed. And apparently they liked me. So they invited me to come back to Michigan for what they called an assessment center for a second interview. And I did it, not because I was excited about going to work in Michigan or for Ford. It was not that I had anything against Ford. My first car was a 56 Fairlane, and then my second one was a 52 Ford pickup I pulled out of the weeds and rebuilt. But anyway, it was. I went back because I'd never been to Detroit. I thought, well, hey, free ride, I'll do that. Went through this assessment. I really didn't like it. I thought I did a bad job. They kind of put you through this mental torture for 8 hours of role playing. And about 3 weeks later, after everything else I had going on had fallen through, they called me back and they said, hey, we want you to know that we thought you did a really good job, and we want you at Ford. I'm sure that was not true, but by that time, they may have been desperate. By that time, I gotten the message. It's like, okay, I got to do this. And so, lo and behold, moved to Michigan, and in my rebuilt Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra that it was a rollover I'd rebuilt, and it took off from there. And started out answering phones, and I thought, I got this degree and I got all this automotive background. I'm answering phones because it was Ford Customer Service Division. Turned out to be one of the big blessings in my life to get connected with customers in a very personal way, oftentimes in a very angry way on their side of it, because when things aren't going right, customers are not happy, and it stayed with me throughout my career that in spite of everything we did in this huge company, at the end of the line, there was a customer, and either things were going well or they weren't. And after having that intense exposure to all of those where things weren't going well, and it was a small percentage, but for me it was every day, it just made me think about things differently. So I went from there and lived in Seattle for a while, and then came back and progressed through more technical positions within Ford on the service side, advocating for customers and for technicians. Part of that was roles in what we call design for service, making sure that as we go through the engineering process on a new vehicle, were we building it or designing it in a way that you could access stuff and actually execute repairs in a reasonable way? Benefits the technician and the customer. And I won some battles and I lost too many. Anybody that works on a Ford could probably attest. There's things you probably shake your head at and go like, what was the deal there? Well, I can tell you it was because of money, usually, or other considerations where you had to make these trade-offs. But it was a great learning experience for me. And I always said, if it was up to service, doggone it, every Ford would be a Model T because they're perfectly serviceable. Unfortunately, that's not exactly where the customer tastes lie in terms of what they expect. And so, it becomes a little more complicated beyond that. So anyway, after I did that and then had an opportunity to go to San Diego for a couple of years where we started up Ford's first electric vehicle venture back in 2000. And some may remember there's this thing called Think Mobility. Got into low-speed vehicles and some what we called city cars at the time, which were full on-road vehicles, but they were small, and that was another great learning experience for me. So that was my first big exposure to EV, and so I've been through a little bit on that front, and what's happening today is just the next iteration of it. So there's like a 10 or 15-year break, and then it kind of took off again, which we always knew it would. It was just a matter of when.
Yeah.
But great experience, and then came back here or back to Detroit and ran what we called service engineering operations. I was chief engineer and a part of that. Then went off to China for 5 years, which was a great experience. And I ran all of service engineering operations for the Eastern Hemisphere before coming back and after doing a director role in our service parts area, parts development and accessories, then came into the role of our executive over what we called service engineering operations globally. Essentially what that is, in short, I was responsible for everything that happened in the back of the store except for the parts themselves, as far as the technical side. So that included warranty, recalls, you name it, the service information training, the diagnostic tools, the systems, what Ford called PTS, Professional Technician System, to provide them support with information, and our technical hotlines, our field service engineers. So there was a lot of stuff in there. But Jay, it was all these things. It was the culmination of a fantastic career where I got to do a little bit of everything in the service side. And so then retired after 32 years, ultimately. And then this ASE opportunity came up. I've been on the board of governors at ASE. And Tim Zilke was retiring, and Tim's fantastic. Those are big shoes to fill. Loved Tim, and I learned so much from him. But anyway, we went through this interview process, and I wasn't done working. I just felt like I couldn't just sit around and enjoy life. That may be a personal defect. I'm not sure what's wrong with me.
I think that's common. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the only one. So anyway, I threw my hat in the ring, and I honestly thought nothing would come of it. I thought they're going to have a lot of great candidates, and when the dust finally settled, they said they wanted me, and that was a great honor because being on the other side of this, on the OE side, I knew that ASE was important. I'd been involved to some degree, but not really. And Ford had not been as involved in the last 20 years because of some things that had happened, and ASE and Ford had drifted apart a little bit. And as I came into ASE, I started to really realize, oh my gosh, there were holes that we were trying to fill in Ford that ASE would have filled. They just would have. And a lot of that goes around technician recruiting, which is it's an industry issue, right? Here you have ASE. Is going to sound like an advertisement, but I'm just telling y'all, ASE.
No, please do.
Education Foundation, one of the best solutions out there in terms of the practical things that people are trying to do, especially to grow your own technicians. And that was kind of our motto. It became our motto at Ford, was that there was going to be no shortcut to this. We needed to grow our own. And what I had missed was the ASE and the ASE Education Foundation were sitting right there as one of those key resources. So anyway, here I am at ASE. And I'm loving it. We're trying to do a few new things, and just trying to stand on the shoulders of those before, and take advantage of all the goodwill that's out there for the brand.
When I say wealth of knowledge at the top, I'm not kidding. Dave has so much experience, and I think what's fascinating to me is that you've been able to see around the world, and coming from small town Wyoming and seeing everything that you've seen over the years. How challenging has it been to kind of keep moving all over the place?
That's a great question. It gets easier. In some ways I was kind of uprooted at an early age, if you will, as a 19-year-old getting shipped off to New Zealand, and it's scary on one hand, and yet on the other hand, you come to realize, man, this is a great experience. And so it came with its challenges, and then I got married about the same time I joined Ford, within a few months of joining Ford, and so I've been blessed to have my sweetheart with me, and then we had 4 kids, and so through that there were times when it was real challenging, and times when it wasn't. And China's an example. With having kids, we were worried about that, and it turned out to be a wonderful experience for them. But it's also, so I got to confess, I am one of those that I love seeing what's over the next hill. It's always just, whether physically or maybe metaphorically. And so for me, I tended to always look at it as more of an adventure than something to be feared. And for me, that worked out well. It's not always the best personal decision sometimes, I suppose, but it worked out well. So for me, it's been one big adventure, Jay.
It's incredible. And in our prior conversations, one of the things I had mentioned is I'm just a geek for this industry, right? And one of those things that I like to do is read about the history of the industry. Ford Motor Company obviously has one of the longest histories in this industry, and just reading about Henry Ford and anything all the way up until current day. I read Alan Mullally's book, and you had talked about how great of a leader he was. And just for me to get some of those stories from your experience firsthand, and kind of visualize what your experiences have been, has been really fun. I've really, really enjoyed learning about that side of your career, and really what came together to make you who you are today. It's really, really a fascinating story.
Well, thanks. And and I think it's this way for all of us. And I'm probably, I'm getting old now. I'm 60, and my brain isn't convinced of that, but my body says I am. And as you age, it's just, I think it's natural for everybody. I'm not discovering something new here. You do get to look back on life with a little more perspective and realize that all of those experiences, and some of them weren't pleasant. There were things within all of that it was stressful. It was hard. It wasn't fun. And yet you can then look back on them and say, well, a lot of those stressful, not fun things also was where some of the greatest growth occurred and became some of the biggest opportunities. And so it is this mixed blessing, if you will, and thinking about things like Alan Mullally and being there when he came in and Ford was at a real low spot, and seeing how the company transformed in so many ways, and a lot of that legacy continues for Ford in a good way. Actually helped shape me as a leader at Ford, and now as I'm coming to ASE, even more so. ASE is frankly, it's a little smaller, okay, a lot smaller organization than I was maybe running at Ford, but the principles are the same, and it doesn't matter. And the other cool thing about that, I don't want to diminish what's happening at ASE. The astounding thing about ASE is the size of the organization versus the impact of the brand and the company, which on one hand is really cool, and on the other hand is a very sobering responsibility, right? That, hey, we exist for the industry, which, and you've heard me talk about this a little bit, Jay. I say it's one of those things where it's truly a righteous cause, and by that I mean it was started by the industry to serve the industry, and in particular service professionals. And technicians are a huge part of that, but includes the service manager, service advisors, parts people, you name it, anybody that touches service. And how well we execute on that day to day, it varies, right? We have opportunities to grow and become better, but it starts with having that foundation of this is a righteous cause. We don't have an axe to grind on one thing or another. We're here to support everybody, and we will advocate on issues, but we're not here to take one particular element of the industry side. We're not here for the OEs. We're not here for the aftermarket. We're not here just for the independent shops. We're here for everybody. And what's cool to me, Jay, is when I look at the makeup of the board at ASE, it really reflects that. Again, I jokingly say it's like cats and dogs living together in harmony, because in the natural world, these guys compete, and they compete hard. And yet you bring them into the ASE environment, they all get it, and it's all about how do we support the industry, because supporting the industry supports them at the end of the day. So anyway, I may have gone off topic a little bit, but it's just it's been a cool experience that way, that transition, things I learned from Ford, from Mullally, and to be able to go incorporate those, and then I get to continue to learn as I do it.
I'd like to do an entire segment just on Mullally, right? Like I think that would be such a fun one to learn from his leadership style. His book was phenomenal.
I've got a fun personal story there, and if we don't have the time, we can
please share. No, I'll geek out over this. I guarantee it.
I've got a few. I mean, some of you've read in the book about a certain meeting where somebody finally confessed bad news and he started clapping, and that is a absolutely true story. I wasn't there, but I know had bosses that were there at the time, and it is absolutely true, and it changed the whole tone at Ford, and it showed me that little things counted. So I'll give you an example of one of those little things. When Alan came in, I wasn't the head of SEO at the time. My boss at the time, his name's Frank Lagon. He was great. Frank was he was a lot of fun. He was intense, could be very intimidating, but I come to really appreciate and love Frank. But I was sitting in my office one day, and for Christmas, it was right after Christmas, as I recall, within a month or two. For Christmas, my son had got this Lego Boeing 777, as they were just rolling out the 777. And, just to show it off a little bit and let him know how proud I was of him that he'd done that, I put it in my office at Ford. So Frank comes walking in one day, and we were going to have an SEO team meeting. So there would have been 600 or 700 people that would have been attending that meeting at Ford headquarters. There's a big auditorium there. He says, hey, we're going to have Alan Mullally sign that. And I'm like, wait a minute, the CEO? And I'm like, yeah, he's coming to our meeting. It was like Alan's first meeting. And so Frank had this idea, it's like, we'll see if he'll sign it. I'm like, okay, this is a little scary. You don't do that at Ford, right? It's not the done thing. From history, if you will, may have been a little stiffer in some ways in that respect. And so he does it. He puts it up. He has it up, covered up on a stand up on the stage. A big stage, 700-seat auditorium. It was packed. Have Alan come and do his bit, and of course, Alan's just this charming guy, and what you saw was what you got. That wasn't just a on TV kind of thing. That we came to learn that was Alan. And at the end, Frank says, "Hey, Alan, would you mind doing us a favor? It's one of our folks, and I think we may have pointed him out. Dave's son built this Lego plane, and we thought it'd be really cool if you wouldn't mind signing it." And he's like, "Absolutely." Right. So Alan, he signs this airplane. Alan had a habit of doing these funny little airplane cartoon signatures that was kind of neat. And he had me come up on the stage and took my picture with him. And so I thought, well, that's cool. I'll take that home to Jordan. And then, of course, I said, when I took it home to Jordan was probably 10 at the time. I said, we need to send him an email. I need to thank him for this. This is a huge deal. And he's like, oh, sure, Dad, we'll do it. And so Jordan, on his own, it was between 10 and 12, somewhere in there, he signs, he sends Alan an email. And I thought, we'll never see anything back, but I wanted my son to have this practice of, showing gratitude when people do something nice for you. So within a day, he gets an email back from Alan, says, "Hey, thanks, Jordan. That was a cool airplane. Oh, by the way, I'm going to send you some things." And so within a few days, Alan had sent Jordan, some videos about the development of the 777, some other airplane videos, sent him some Ford stuff, all this stuff that he had sent to Jordan, who was the son of an employee who he didn't know, who really was of no significance in the company at the time. Not that I probably ever was, but it for sure wasn't then. And he'd done all these things. I was an example of one. I know I wasn't, my son may have been the first, because as he just started, he certainly was not the last. And again, that just goes back to the servant leadership style that Alan had, and set the tone for an entire company, and became a real example for me of, hey, that's a great way to lead, and just being himself. So there's my little story, Jay, about Alan, and something you won't read about in a book.
You know how much I love those types of stories, and hearing from your experiences. It's such a cool thing, because it's one of those things where growing up in the industry, I don't think you ever feel like you're going to have those type of connections, or at that level be able to have the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world send your kid a gift basket, right? It's very humbling and very just refreshing to hear that. And for every leader that's out there listening right now, if you haven't read that book, please do, because there are so many excellent lessons in it. But then also just the ability to be able to be comfortable with who you are, I think is such a big lesson in general too. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And is your shop looking to fill open positions or grow your bench of candidates? Consider adding WrenchWay to your recruiting efforts. WrenchWay helps shops and dealerships all across the U.S. find better qualified candidates for their service centers. WrenchWay Top Shop memberships are only $150 per month and include unlimited job postings on the best job board in the industry, a guarantee of 10 qualified applicants, and the shops choose who is considered qualified, access to connect with and help over 650 high schools and post-secondary schools, and much more. Learn more about WrenchWay's Top Shop memberships by visiting wrenchway.com and selecting the For Shops tab under the Solutions dropdown. Link is in the show notes. I think as we talk through all of this, it leads us to ASE. And I think the really intriguing part about you taking this role at ASE is that you were outside of ASE. Of course, you were on the board, so you had some level of influence, or a lot of influence there. But what made it intriguing to you? What made it kind of that job that you wanted? Because it is a big job, and there are a lot of things and a lot of things changing in the industry, and trying to maintain that reputation, trying to maintain that brand as a whole. It's a big job and a big responsibility. So what drove you to really want to do that?
Well, I think sometimes I probably couldn't be accused of thinking too far ahead. It felt good. It felt right, Jay. It was a short answer. But I think that to go along with that, what I said about seeing what ASE was and is in terms of what it means to the industry, I thought, how could you not want to do this? And this, for me, this goes back to my passion for technicians as a recovering technician, as many of us like to say. I think that I saw it as this opportunity to I don't know, to give back in a way, to an industry that has served me really well. But that makes it sound like a sacrifice, and it's not. It's not a sacrifice. The people that are sacrificing, as you well know, are the folks that are out there day in and day out on the shop floor, doing the job, taking care of customers, meeting all those demands that they have, right? You want to, for many, still under flat rate pay system of some sort. So you want to get the job done fast. You want to do it efficiently. You want to take care of the customer. You want to take home a paycheck. And with all those things that go on, and so many people not recognizing or fully appreciating the value of a technician and what they do. I want to promote that. And ASE itself, I saw in its own small way, through the process of certification and credentialing, it helps to do that. Now, we can talk about this more later, but there's more opportunities to come there. I'd say we have a lot of headroom there, and I'm sure some of those who might be listening will be like, yeah, you do. And hey, I'm not offended. Nobody is. It's this process of growth. So for me, that's what's fun, is when I get to meet technicians in particular, or anybody, whether it's service advisors or parts folks or service managers, shop owners. I just get a kick out of that, because that's where the rubber really does meet the road in our industry. And for me to get to hang out with them is a lot of fun. When I was at Ford, getting to hang out with the dealers, that's where it was really at for me. I'd much rather be doing that than 80% of the things I did, because that's where you find out where the real problems were, where the opportunities where we could make things better. And I want to kind of do the same thing with ASE. So that was, for me, that was a lot of the appeal, was it is the people. And then I'll say the bonus that I honestly hadn't thought about that much at the time was getting to work with the unique board that I have. We have a board of directors from the industry, and then this expanded board of governors, which I was on before. And so you've got the major OEMs, you got some the major chains. We have aftermarket service chains. We have independents who they own one store, but these guys are so sharp, all of them, and they all come at this from their own angle. And then we have people on the parts side. We have people on the tool and equipment side. And so you add all that together, and for me to get to connect all those dots and associate with all of them, it's really cool. And then all of us trying to say, how can we put this together and do some good things for the technicians and the rest of the industry. Anyway, a lot of fun.
Well, and I think that's where you're so uniquely qualified for this position, is because of your background, of your love of the industry, and then really understanding coming into it that, hey, there are things we can improve. There are things that I think all of us look at ASE as, we all know who ASE is, right? Everybody in the industry knows what ASE is. And I think one of the complications that I feel we run into and we need to get unified as an industry on is what that certification means, or what we can do to, I don't know, better help the general public understand whether they're having their work done by a quality person, somebody that's qualified to do the work. And when I say that, we still kind of struggle with getting the industry on the same page in terms of certification. There's varied views on who values it, who doesn't value it, why they don't value it, or why they do value it. And I don't know that we'll ever 100% be aligned, but it feels like there's opportunity to kind of, as you said, connect the dots and really try to bring everybody together here.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because here's one of the observations I had. You and I may have talked about this in an earlier chat. As I've come into this, and some of it, I'll be honest, it's reflecting my own, some of my own issues or challenges, I guess. The term I've been throwing around a little bit is I want to enable excellence. And here's one of the things. There's a lot of directions we could go with this conversation, Jay, but I'll go in this direction for now.
Sure.
I firmly believe, and I see it on the social media and everything, and I don't blame them. There are people that'll poke at ASE and certification and what has it done for me lately, and there can be lots of reasons for that. And some of that may have to do with the challenge that it is, and you could accuse me of saying that internally with the team, we've got a fantastic team.
Yes, you do.
They are, and they're putting up with me, and you know several of them, and they are all good people. Love them.
They are,
and they're no different than me in terms of their passion for the customer, and in that sense, it is our service professionals. They are passionate, and so it's great. But I said, I feel like we're kind of the DMV in some ways in terms of some of the processes. None of that's done on purpose. It's just as you grow up, right? You kind of grow up doing things a certain way, and it continues a certain way, and you keep adding on to it. And before you know it, you can be the DMV. And I don't think of the DMV in a good way. They're not very convenient. I feel like it's hard to maneuver, and you got to do everything a certain way, and some of that is required. But I said I want to be the anti-DMV, and part of that is enabling success. So by that I mean I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know how to get at the numbers, but I am confident that I'm going to say there's 30% of the folks out there that may not be certified, who the reason they're not certified is because there's things like test anxiety. It's a real thing. I know it. There's other challenges that they deal with in terms of convenience of testing, to be able to get to it. All these things that go with it that make it hard to want to go do it. And it has nothing to do with their ability. They already have the ability. They have the knowledge. And if you could sit them down and go through everything, you go, you are an ASE master tech. By all rights, you are. You just don't have the piece of paper to go with it, right? So easier said than done, right? But I think it's a great thing for us to strive for. One of the things we want to strive for is how do we enable those folks that are already playing at that level to be recognized for it? And there's no getting around the effort that is required of the individual. It does require some effort. It is inconvenient, but I don't want to add to the anxiety. We want to be able to explain things. It's not about dumbing down the test. That's the worst thing you could do.
Right.
It's about how do you enable them to get comfortable with it and to feel like they're succeeding. And even when you don't pass a test, look at that as a stepping stone towards passing a test. It's not a failure. It's just the next step. So it's kind of like Edison and the light bulb, right? Where I don't remember the exact numbers, but essentially, 10,000 learning opportunities before I got to the successful filament. It's not going to be 10,000 for anybody on an ASE test, but you get my drift. So that's one of the things we want to do, so that you're enabling that success and that recognition that they already deserve. And then there's others that there are things they need to learn. They know things, but there's gaps that need to be filled. I'm one of those. I have lots of gaps to be filled.
Same.
And so again, but it comes back to how does ASE portray it? How do we as an industry portray it to say this isn't about passing or failing? It's about identifying where my gaps are and then saying, okay, I'm going to come back and take another crack at it. And there's a lot of great learning resources out there, a lot of great training programs. They're not, ASE doesn't do the training, but we certainly encourage all of it so that people do have that success. But to me, a part of this is just an attitude shift in terms of how we look at it, how to enable that success, and go forward from there. So I'm going to jump into another piece of this that you touched on.
Please do.
Which is on that consumer side. I think that's one of our opportunities. This is being a nonprofit means you don't necessarily have a lot of spare cash kicking around, and so sometimes you're doing things on a shoestring, but sometimes you just got to go spend the money and apply a little faith. So some of this goes back to the consumer side, and you're going to see some things coming out from us in this last half of the year. You're going to see a more active social media presence. You're going to see, if you're paying attention, we're not going to go out there and brag about it, but you're just going to see it. There's some things we're doing in that space. We brought in some extra help with that, and then we're doing some flat out marketing around in the advertising space. That it's not going to be a bunch of TV spots. We can't afford that. But again, focused on social media, search engine optimization, maybe even a few billboards, some things like that. Hopefully having a little fun, and also tugging at heartstrings a little bit with customers to make them think about it. We've all seen those things that are a bit emotionally impactful that, hey, doctors and nurses are important, right? Well, guess what? Technicians, they keep your car running every day, so you don't have some catastrophe that we just take for granted every day because they all do such a good job. They're important people. And you realize it when you do have one of those unfortunate events where you're down by the side of the road and you need help. Well, we want to plant that seed with people. And so part of that is the customer recognizing the importance of it and them saying, hey, I may not fully understand everything that goes into what it means to be ASE certified, but I recognize it's important, and the people that are ASE certified are exceptional individuals. And that's what we're going for. So those are some of the, again, you'll see that coming through the end of the year. So just if you're paying attention, hopefully what you'll see is not some big splash, but just all of a sudden, hey, hang on a minute. I'm seeing a little more pop up here on ASE, but not ASE talking about ASE. We're not important. What's important is the people, and trying to point at the people that do make ASE important.
I shared this with you in a prior conversation, and I think the 2 points that you had there, and kind of adapting the testing itself to maybe cater to some of those very capable people that weren't able to maybe take that test. I was one that really struggled with test anxiety growing up, so I'm completely familiar with that, and it stinks, right? Not being able to kind of show off what you actually know, and the public perception piece. And I think the public perception piece, I'll start there, and I kind of want to dive into both of these a little bit more, because the public perception piece was the one where from afar, I felt like there was a huge opportunity for ASE to make waves, right? And I think as we look at our industry as a whole, and we see how talented these folks are and what we need to do with labor rates, and the fact that we do need to work as an industry to make shops more profitable to be able to support some of this other stuff that we're trying to do, I see an avenue for ASE to really drive that perception, that outside perception. And I think maybe what was lost in prior years was the industry knew who ASE was, but maybe the outside of the industry wasn't as familiar. And so the fact that you're attacking that side of it and bringing general awareness, not only to the industry, but to ASE as a whole, I think that makes ASE stronger. In maybe that customer does walk in the front door and say, hey, I see all this stuff about ASE certification. Is your shop ASE certified? I think when we start to kind of get that ball of momentum going, it maybe provides some of that structure we were looking for as an industry, that, Joe Blow down the street can't just throw a shingle up and be doing a family's brakes, right? That maybe they should have a qualified professional doing that, and that they need to have some idea of what a qualified professional is by going through and taking good testing and being able to see how good these folks are. And if you get certified because of that, I think that helps the health of the industry. And it's one of those things where, I think at times some of the conversation that we've had here so far is some of the elephant in the room type of stuff. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about you, is you're not afraid to talk about any elephant in the room types of things. And I really, really respect that.
Yeah.
But no, I think you're really on the right track as an organization. I think tackling that public perception side is very, very important, not just to ASE, but to the technicians and to the industry as a whole. And I think people will see that in the coming years, the impact that you guys are about to have, because I do feel very, very strongly that ASE does need to lead the way in that regard. And that badge means something to a lot of people in this world. Right. So I just want to applaud you for really, really looking at that maybe through a little bit of a different lens.
Well, thanks. I do appreciate that, but that lens was influenced by a lot of people, right? That have
absolutely
helped me to put those thoughts together. But you hit on several good things there. But you think back to, for me, it was like, let's just go back in history for a second. So ASE is organized in 1972, and basically it started really with the OEMs and NADA, and then they recognized, hey, it can't just be us, we got to bring in others. The impetus for that goes back to the federal government at that time, because of some things that were going on, feeling that, hey, we might need a federal licensure requirement. And the industry, and of course the OEMs had a big chunk of that, and on that side of it, but everyone could see not the best way to do it. It generally hasn't, when government gets involved in those kinds of things, well intended or not, it tends to not really end up satisfying what you intended to do, and you kind of added on another bureaucracy. So starting ASE in 1972 to address issues like, there was concerns about fraud and stuff like that, and those things can happen. That's unfortunate. A lot of what they learned was lack of competence, back to that, we'll say the shade tree mechanic perspective, and they needed to distinguish things, right? Because the way the business is set up, you're right. Anybody can go out and hang a shingle and say, hey, I can fix brakes, I can recalibrate your ADAS, I can do whatever. That doesn't mean they can. And so that I think that distinction was understood early on, Jay. And so to me, what happened is you grow up through the years, some of the reasons for why ASE was started in the first place, some of those core principles which would really resonate with the customer as well as the industry, faded a bit. And it's almost like, well, I got to do this to get paid more. Well, you've kind of lost the plot at that point. I'm all for
the whole purpose of it, right?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, right? Because it's real. There should be recognition for that. That's how you develop people. But going back to those core principles, I feel like that's what was missed. And so those are some of the things you're going to see us trying to do with the pennies that we have to start to reinforce that message. And it won't happen overnight. But I think we have ways to do it, and there's some fun ways we're going to do it. I saw one of the, I'm getting ahead a little bit, but I saw one meme the other day that we were playing with of a guy dressed up as a dentist, and it says, yeah, I don't know how to do that procedure, but I can Google it. And just to make him pause for a minute, it's like, if that's not okay for your dentist, why is that okay for your technician? It's not okay. So anyway, just some fun things like that we're hoping to do that'll help to, there'll be some serious and some fun to help put the message across. But in all of it, what I really want to do at the core of it is recognize the service professional. get the, they should be the status that they deserve. Because you're often not, you're often not seeking it as a tech. You just want to fix cars, but it feels good to be recognized. We all like to be loved and to be recognized for the expertise that you have. So hopefully we can do some of that.
One of the challenges I see in moving forward, and I don't want to just talk about challenges because I think there's so many good things happening, but this is almost a internal challenge or a conflict in my own head that I've almost argued with myself about over the years. It turns out I never win that conversation, but it is how we fix the technician shortage while also getting more certified technicians. And I think in some level in my head, I look at it and I say, okay, maybe that brings more credibility to our industry and to how talented these great technicians are. But at the other end, I'm like, it's another barrier for that person to be able to get to where they want to go to. And, I think because we put ourselves in a spot as an industry where we had such a shortage of people, it kind of allowed us to pull the curtain down a little bit and maybe allow for things that we wouldn't have in the past in terms of like standards and that type of thing, because we had to, right? Like we've got to get more people in and we've got to keep more people. And if we put more barriers in place, are we pushing more people away? And so I always kind of, I've seen this argument on social media as well amongst our own community, right? Our own industry, where you'll have both sides of the argument. And at some level, you're like, yeah, I get both sides of the argument, but what do we do for the best of the industry? What do we do to get our industry into a better place? And I'm interested to see if maybe you've had some of those same thoughts or really how maybe you think we should go about that, because it is interesting to me.
Well, it is, and wow, there's all kinds of places to go there too. We could take hours, Jay, and you'll lose all your audience. But not because of you, because of me. But
I could do that too.
There's a few things there. What I've come, all right, one that's just popped into my head that illustrates some of the fallacy, right? I'll just say we had one of our major partners come to us and say they had a group of dealers, so I guess I'm narrowing down to OEMs, that had said, we are losing technicians to brand X because they don't require ASEs, and we do. And so we need to stop requiring ASEs because we're going to lose people. And we're having a hard time bringing people in because of these requirements. We actually have the numbers on some things, folks. We do have data, and by the data, it was crystal clear that those people were not leaving and going to somebody else that didn't require ASEs at the same level that this other brand did. It's not there. It's not shown in the numbers. So if you can get your head wrapped around this, and this is the hard thing to hear, the reason people leave jobs usually isn't because of the pay, and usually isn't because some other brand doesn't require something of them. It's because they don't like you. There's something going on in your personal relationship at the shop level that isn't right. And you got to take a hard look in the mirror. That doesn't address all attrition, but it's a factor, right? And what we're finding, we've seen this since COVID, is folks jumping out of the traditional automotive space, and we've seen more going to fleets, into other careers, which should be a cause for alarm for us, because to me, it's one of those things that make you start to question, among other things, our traditional flat rate system. That scares, I'll especially say younger generations. It scares them a little bit, and just the behaviors that can engender that don't make for a good shop environment or for a good job satisfaction environment. And so there's always this balance of, how do you get productivity and quality and satisfaction and maintain the right balance there. If you think that it can't be done, I would strongly suggest that that's not true. I've been blessed to see many living examples, independents, dealers, chain stores, where they know how to do this and they don't have attrition problems. And so that just shoots down some of the stuff that sometimes, it can be blamed on ASE and certifications, and that's the driving issue. It isn't. And then you get back to coming into the industry. As I'm looking at it now, and you could say this is self-serving, and I suppose it is, but it doesn't mean it isn't true, that actually there's a need for more of this, because actually what I'm seeing is as younger people become interested, what are the tokens of recognition of who I am and what I'm doing? My parents think I just change tires and oil and I'm just a greasy mechanic. Any of us that are in the industry, I'd say it's offensive. Really it is, in so many ways. Because we know that, yes, sometimes you do get dirty. That's not the hard part of the job. It's everything that goes on here in the brain that you need to know that not just anybody could do. If they could, they'd be doing it themselves. And guess what? They aren't and they can't. So what are those tokens of recognition to help people, not just the individuals, I'm thinking about younger people now, that bring them in, and something that they can show not just to themselves but show to others. If you get into a little bit of marketing space here, there's marketing principles around this. It's actually psychology, principles of psychology that get into when you make a purchase, if you will, your ability for someone else to see that purchase and go, oh yeah, that's cool, because guess what? They see that it's recognized, so therefore they think it's cool, reinforces what you did, that, hey, I'm doing a good thing, this was the right thing to do. Well, at the very basic level, that's part of it. But I'm going to go in a little different direction for a second, Jay, and that's tying some things together. And some of the good work that WrenchWay, and I'm sure there's others that are doing it too, and there are.
Absolutely.
But you're hosting the show, so why not point out WrenchWay? When you think about this circle of, I call it the circle of life, and I think you may have gotten a peek at that recently, where from a strategy standpoint, we say, here's what we want. We want certified professionals, service professionals who exemplify excellence. That's your end state. That's what we all want. And you want a lot of them, right? Because we have a shortage. Well, how do you do that? And there's lots of ways to attack that, but back to our consumer discussion. There's an end consumer that if they care about it and they want it, that's kind of the beginning of it. And if the consumer wants it, then you start looking at the business side of it. So whether it's your own shop or you're part of a chain, a service chain, or if you're an OEM dealer, if you see consumers saying, I'm looking for service professionals that exemplify, that I can trust with my vehicle, then guess what? They start to demand it. And we would like to think that ASE certification reflects that excellence, right? That you are that kind of employee. And so if the consumer's asking for it, the businesses demand it, guess what? They're going to value technicians who have that. And if the businesses are valuing that, just keep going around this imaginary circle, then I'm going to have educators who recognize that, oh, businesses want this. Therefore, if I want to provide students that businesses want to employ, because guess what? That's a good reflection on me as an educator, then I want to start training and educating young people that are going to become, guess what? Back to the top of this circle, certified service professionals who exhibit that excellence. And it's one of those, we call it a virtuous cycle that just keeps building on itself. I like to think of it as a flywheel, right? I'm a technician. It's like a flywheel. You keep putting energy into it and it just keeps spinning faster and faster. It really is that simple. But guess what? You don't do it by dumbing it down. You actually make it elite. So I would say we need more of that, not less. Now, how we do it, that's the big challenge. And the thing that I see WrenchWay doing and others, that's what we're trying to do, is you're trying to connect students, and I'd say go beyond that, and people that are already professionals in the business, connecting those students, those businesses, and those schools. Those are three critical components to it. And if we connect those, and everybody's got their eye on that consumer, saying that the consumer wants it, you're going to be successful. There is no shortcut to this, and there's not. We have a common friend who would say, "There's not a shortage of people. There's a shortage of qualified technicians." Right? And I'll be honest with you, by the numbers, he's not wrong. There's good things going on out there to provide scholarships and other incentives to get students into the industry. I don't have a complaint with that. But there is a reality. That's not the biggest issue. There are students taking shop classes in high school. Some of them are exploring it in college. The question is, what is the quality of that program, and are they setting them up for success? Are we setting them up for success? And that's where the big opportunity is. And that's where I'm going to put in my plug for the Education Foundation.
Please.
Honestly, and I hope instructors out there, please don't be offended. I'm just going to say it. In my view, if you're not seeking ASE accreditation for your program, I can't tell if you're not cheating a student, because that's what it amounts to at the end of the day. You all know of people, I'm sure none of you are those people, but I'm sure you know people that have programs where it's somebody's hobby shop, as we like to say. And they might be working on the instructor's boat or on his motorcycle or something. And I'm not saying there's no value in that. There is something there. But at the end of the day, that student comes out of there with something. They're thinking, hey, I can go to work at a local shop and I can at least start changing oil. Only to find out within 2 weeks, you don't even know how to safely rack a car. You don't know the basic safety checks. You don't know all of these things that you should have known coming out of there so that they could work with that new piece of clay and mold it into something better. Instead, you're disappointed. You might get fired, or you might walk away saying, I don't know any of this, and I'm done with automotive. I'm going to go do something else. Folks, again, it's not to be offensive to anybody doesn't have an ASE accredited program, but I'm telling you, how does somebody on the outside tell? I can tell you, if you've got an ASE accredited program, you're producing students that are ready to go. They're ready to go. Doesn't mean they know everything. They don't. They won't. But they're ready to be trained at the next level. And if you don't, I have no way of telling. So I think at a fundamental level, Jay, we can go on all day about it. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
That is a core principle here. So don't shy away from this. If you don't want to do ASE, I guess that's fine. If you want to do ASE certifications, but don't shy away from having standards and requirements as you bring students in that are going to bring them along. And then we can go into all the new technology. I think of cars as robots on wheels. Robotics programs are big. Great. Let's tie into that. Let's take advantage of it. Because guess what? We're right there. We just don't even think about it that way ourselves. And could go on and on about those opportunities. But you hit a real hot button there for me, Jay. So sorry I kind of went off on it.
I absolutely love it. And I think we should maybe do a follow-up podcast at some point about that circle of life that you're talking about, because I think for all of us to be in that conversation and really understanding kind of that whole ecosystem and why accreditation is important, why certification is important, why having a customer asking for that is important. And as technology continues to advance, our skill sets continue to advance as technicians. That's going to require that we get paid more, right? And in order to get paid more, we have to be able to charge more to a customer. In order to charge more to a customer, we have to justify that increase in price. And to me, I feel like this is something that we've got to get everybody together on and really try to get everybody on the same page. And I know that's probably impossible, but whether it's the OEs, whether it's the independent networks or the fleets that are out there, really trying to come together. And this is where I see, and this is where, just being quite frank, I am so excited about the direction that we're going with ASE, and where I think we can start to drive that unification. And you and I have had several conversations over how much at WrenchWay we want to promote what you're doing and be able to kind of, I think the reason why we want to do that is because we know how important ASE is to this industry, and for what we need in the industry moving forward, ASE's got to be a foundational piece of that. And so I'm such a fan of yours, and as I've gotten to know you more and more, I think I'm learning so much from you, and I think, to me, it's almost emotional in some level, right? Of seeing what I think you're doing progressively with ASE. And so when I hear your passion, when I see everything that you're doing, in my eyes, so many of the right things right now, I can't help but be encouraged that we're moving in the right direction. And that really, really means the world to me. So I said it at the top. It was an absolute honor to have you on here. I really, really respect you and look up to you. So I thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and right back at you. Honestly, we talked about this a lot fair. What you guys have done to bootstrap an amazing company. I don't know if I could do it, and so a lot of good things going on there. And for the industry, I'm glad you mentioned fleets. I mean, fleets is throughout this as well, right? And here's the thing: you can see we are as a team. We're trying to, I say, blow the dust off the brand, move things forward. I appreciate your patience with us. At the same time, don't let us off the hook. We have to get better. We want to get better. And at the same time, I keep asking myself this question. If the industry comes to the point where we don't need ASE anymore, then shut it down. But I will tell you that as I'm getting more and more into it, I'm like, oh, we need it more than ever.
Yes, we do.
And again, self-serving maybe doesn't mean it's not true, because it is. So I'm just glad to be on the journey, and folks like yourself, and there's so many others out there as well, Jay, that have been so kind to us and give us a platform to talk, and we want to do more of it because, again, it helps us to get better as we have that dialogue. So thank you.
One last thing, you had a quote in there, and you didn't mention the individual's name, but I would be remiss to leave him out, which was from George Arentz, who is a dear friend of mine, and really the reason why Dave and I got connected and have developed this great relationship was because of George. So, George, if you're listening out there, we appreciate you and everything you do for the industry, and just for my sanity in general. I think without your weekly jokes, I don't know how I make it through this life.
Amen to that, and we love George. We are so fortunate to have him as part of our team, and we have some other Georges out there on the team.
Yes, you do.
George is, well, maybe we don't. He is a bit of a one of a kind, but we love that guy. So thanks for mentioning that, Jay, and thanks again. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining me. We'll get you back on to talk about the whole circle of life. We'll get real deep on that side the next time.
All right, deal.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.